Welcome. We are so grateful that you're here joining us in the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching at Iowa State University. My name is Sarah Marchetti, and it is my pleasure to serve as the Assistant Provost and Executive Director for our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. We welcome you to today, our second in the series featuring Dr. Abram Anders. Abram Anders is the Director of Communication Innovation and an Associate Professor in the Department of English. He received his PhD in English from Pennsylvania State University. A scholar of rhetoric and composition, Dr. Abrams' research focuses on academic innovation, business and professional communication, creative collaboration and design practices, innovation and entrepreneurship, and leadership and strategic communication. Dr. Abrams has received the Outstanding Researcher and Teacher Award by the Association for Business Communication, as well as the 2016 Rising Star Award and 2014 Pearson Award for Innovation in Teaching and Technology. Dr. Abram has been a wonderful friend to the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, serving on several of our committees, including our Innovation Committee, and we'll be most looking forward to his talk today on how to use ChatGPT to boost your research and teaching. Our next in the series will be with Dr. Christine Dennison, a professor in accounting who will be talking about preventing cheating with AI, specifically ChatGPT. And then later on this month, we have Dr. Michael Bougea, who is a distinguished professor in our journalism and mass communication fields, talking about career preparation in the land-grant tradition. If you're interested in this or other talks, we encourage you to scan the QR code there or look us up on our events page at Iowa State University. With no further ado, I would like to present Dr. Abram Anders to you, and I'm certain this is going to be a very interesting and very thought-provoking session. So Abram, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm extremely excited to present to you all today. It's not often that we have the chance to present and talk about a technology that has the likelihood of radically transforming how we all do research and teach and think. Of course, AI tools have been around and being developed for decades. But as we've seen through the intense media coverage, both inside and outside higher ed, these tools are hitting society differently, and this is a phase change in their evolution. Now, many of you may have attended other talks and other presentations about tools like ChatGPT, and undoubtedly, many of them talked about ethical concerns and talked about academic dishonesty and so forth. And I think those are valuable topics. But one thing that I personally have been looking for more of is for people to engage how to actually use these tools. For after all, every new technology presents opportunities to innovate, like we want to innovate at Iowa State, in the sense of innovation being a way to do things differently, to do them better. And I think as academics, as faculty, as scholars, as teachers, we want to be using these tools, learning about their capacities so that we can engage meaningfully in how they evolve in the future and in how the organizations that operate them use them and create policies that are humane and have good consequences for us all. As my abstract suggested, I'm going to be providing a bunch of use cases for you and your research and teaching, and we're going to even have an interactive component as we get into the second half of the talk, where you'll get a chance to try out some prompting techniques that could help you get great outputs from these tools to use in your own work. So let's begin. What is ChatGPT? ChatGPT is a large language model tool. It was developed by OpenAI, and it uses machine learning techniques to generate human-like text. The model is trained on a massive amount of text data, allowing it to understand and generate a wide range of language. At a high level, large language models like ChatGPT work by using a neural network architecture known as a transformer. This allows it to pay attention to different parts of the input text, which helps it understand the context and generate more accurate and fluent responses. Now, there are limitations. It has a high level of fluency and linguistic competence, but it's important to note that it has limitations when it comes to functional cognitive competence. It cannot often perform tasks that require common sense, reasoning, or an understanding of the world. Stephen Wolfram, who's a well-known computational scientist, has a great primer on how these tools work that goes very in-depth, but is very clear and lucid. So if you're someone who really wants to know the nuts and bolts, I highly recommend this post. The key takeaway I want to offer to you now is that at its essence, even though things get complicated very quickly, what these tools do is just adding one word at a time. They predict the next most likely word given a sequence of words and the prompt that was originally provided. Ideally, it's not actually the 100% most likely next word, but the 80% most likely word, because that gives enough room for variation. Now, if we look at a specific tool like ChatGPT, as they have just posted on their website, we can see that on the right, we have the basic large language model process. It pre-trains on a data set, sometimes as large as nearly the entire internet. And the pre-trained model then can be deployed and used in different ways. Then a tool like ChatGPT comes along and provides reviewer instructions, adds reviewers, and fine-tunes the data set. This is the stage at the process where they can introduce interactions and make it work well as a chat. This is where we can introduce guardrails that keep the chat from hallucinating in ways that could lead to threats or interpersonal conflicts, as we've seen it fail in some of these tools at times. The result is a fine-tuned model that has really astonishing capacities. However, we must always keep in mind that this tool is trained on our own human text. And as one New Yorker article put it, ChatGPT is a blurry JPEG of the web, meaning that it reduces all of the content, all of the things on the web, the good, the bad, the ugly, the correct, the incorrect, and it reduces that into an abstract statistical model. And we should never forget that that's what's underlying the beautiful, exciting text that it produces. A group of researchers described it this way: large language models are stochastic, random parrots. They repeat in randomized ways that respond to specific contexts. They point out further that these tools embed the very biases that human beings do. So we can expect to find sexism, racism. We can expect to find privileging of all the things that are privileged in the rest of the world and the internet as it is today. And it's something we will have to contend with as we work with them. The other point that I want to remind is that we have fluent linguistic competency. And one of the things that human beings have learned to do is to see that as a proxy for intelligence. If somebody can speak and talk clearly and intelligently, clearly and accurately, then we tend to assume intelligence. And that's one of the things we have to really be careful with when we use these tools. Just because it sounds smart doesn't mean it is smart. And we have to really double check everything we get from it. Lastly, and this is a really huge one, we all can be told over and over again that these tools are predictive text tools. There's no cognition or thinking behind the outputs. And yet, when you start to interact with them and they start to talk back to you in ways that sound really smart, it's easy to lose this distinction and to imagine that they have emotion, that they have sentience. So again, it's a really important thing. These tools don't know what they're talking about. They can predict and create text based on the collective knowledge of human beings as represented in the corpus that the tools are trained on. We have to always remember that. And when we think about using them as a partner in our own creation and supplying our human cognitive capacity, we want to remember that these tools are really not authors. For after all, as the science journal Nature put it, any attribution of authorship carries with it accountability for the work, and AI tools cannot carry such responsibility. We, as users of the tools, carry that responsibility. And At the same hand, because of the additional challenges and stakes created by using these tools, we should acknowledge when we're using them, and we can do it in a simple way by doing so in our acknowledgement of our work. Here's how we used it, just like we might acknowledge using a statistical model or a specialized software in an analysis in a research paper. If we take away anything from this very brief overview of these tools, what I would suggest is that large language model tools like ChatGPT are not sentient, they're not objective, and they're not authoritative. And we should always, always keep that in mind, no matter how smart and useful they seem. Now, with that in mind, I want to shift gears and talk about all the exciting things that people are doing with these tools. So the first place, predictably, that is picked up on these tools is professional workplaces, and in particular, marketing and content creators. One of the things that these tools are really, really gifted at is working with existing structured data or information and existing structured communication or messaging outputs. So if you're creating blog content, digital ad copy, e-commerce copy, sales copy, social media content, all of those, a company may have existing templates and models for how they've done it in the past. They may have a file with information about their ideal customers who they're sending out to. And using AI to merge those things and create drafts of content that then a human writer can review and put out can really ramp up the productivity of that organization in a way that builds on its existing expertise and intellectual property. Here you can see some testimonials from another such tool where they're being used in situations such as brand compliance. We're reviewing content created by writers to see, are they following our brand guidelines? Or we can have a critical incident workflow for customer service, and we can see, are the correct policies and offers being made to clients based on our workflow and our procedures that we've created. A general purpose tool like this one, Jasper AI, has been optimized to work not just for those types of marketing scenarios, but across a wide range of workflows, including writing emails or posting on social media. There's a joke going around that you'll have one bot writing the long version of the email and another bot decoding it into the simple answer. I want the job in the middle. I'm very excited to start this new opportunity at this company and really work with all of you, and so on. There's even tools being developed for research. Here, Elicit is an early such tool that will actually take your research question, do multiple searches for you, find relevant articles, create cards for each of them, and show how they're all linked together, including the relevant citations. And so it can create this AI-assisted workflow for what is a very recognizable research process for almost any academic. So those are the types of broad uses that many companies are putting, and there's many, 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 many more than those. But what can these tools do, and what can't they do in practice? And I would have to admit here, it's really a moving target. Just this last week, I was at the CEAS conference, College of Composition and Communication conference. And Anna Mills, who's been an early scholar, who's really looked closely at these and been great about helping us figure these out, shared this overview of what ChatGPT is capable of. It can write grammatically correct text on topic in an academic style and sound plausible. Some people have summed this up as saying it can write the B- entry-level college essay and not much better. Well, that's sort of true, but it's moving quickly. Very recently, another scholar who's been really a leader in using these tools and thinking about them had early access to Bing AI's new search engine-based chat feature, which integrates live search with real internet results from the present tense, not just up to 2021 like ChatGPT. And he found that it's a huge leap forward. He asked it to create a SWOT analysis of precision farming with AI in the US. And it outputted something that to other people on the internet who are in fact precision farming experts as very reasonable start for a consulting service, with not only detailed bullet points, but also citations, which is something that ChatGPT hasn't been able to do. And when he asked it to write an essay, he found that it is writing B- essays, no more. Here, he compared a standard result from ChatGPT on the right with what Bing created. And although I know you can't read this text out there, I have the link in my slides. you will find that it created something much more sophisticated that, again, also included citations. But I would draw you to this. Here's the prompt that Professor Molick put in to get that really great quality essay from Bing. You'll note, if you were to read this closely, that it packs a ton of very accurate, precise information that is well beyond a standard prompt that perhaps a freshman in college would write. And so a big rule of these tools is that you get the quality out that you put in. And they do not make your disciplinary knowledge or your communication expertise any less valuable. They make it more valuable, because without it, you can't get the kind of results that those with it can. So with those as background, what are some use cases for using these tools in research and teaching? Well, if you'll remember, if we think about this, what did we say that these tools are good at? Working with structured data, working with structured message types. Think, where can you automate and build on existing procedures? Think, where do you have structured inputs and structured outputs that you can leverage? Think, where can you have a structured dialogue that follows a format or a model, such as debate or counter debates? Think process, think workflow. So one of the things that I want to challenge people to do is move beyond thinking these tools as something you put in a question, you get a response. Write me an essay, do the thing, and then I'm done, or I revise a little and turn it in. It's an impoverished way to think about these tools. And in fact, they can be useful at every stage of the research and writing process. For example, Ethan Molick, again, you got to follow his blog. He's pretty great. He talks about how you can use AI to generate ideas. He describes how you can use constraints to have it come up with many different ideas using unique formulations. And pretty much every creative idea generation technique that entrepreneurs use, you can ask ChatGPT to use, and it will give you as good or better results as a human being can in a very compressed time frame. You can also have it work with your own writing. Maybe you do free writes or brain dumps from extensive research, where you just type everything you're thinking and learning into one long unstructured document, like our scholar here, Bilal. He used this to take an unstructured draft and gave it the prompt, please remove redundant words in the following passage and make it coherent and cohesive. And it turned his quick flow of consciousness notes into something structured that could be the beginning of a very basic zero draft. Other people are using these tools with summarization and note-taking techniques. So for example, here, this scholar uses ChatGPT to create progressive summarization of his notes, where he's like digesting it into notes that could go directly into a final writing text, and plugging it into a note-taking tool called Rome Research that has backlinks where you can go from idea to idea like a web. Now, if those are ideas for how you can use this for research and at an inventional stage, we can also think about it for writing. And this is where we have to learn how to write great prompts. This social media influencer, Rob Lennon, starts to give us a hint at how we might do that a little bit better than just putting in a task. We can think about dividing it down into topic, audience, goal, and style, and that can help us get better results. We can also search ChatGPT prompts. There's many sites that have repositories of these, and we can integrate into our tasks, not just those basic features of the rhetorical situation, but also specific analytical or communicative models. Here we see models for marketing that integrate concepts like sunk cost fallacy, law of diminishing returns, or the Pareto principle. We can even have it write abstracts for us as academics. A recent research study found that abstracts written by ChatGPT fooled peer reviewers. Now, of course, that's not how we want to use this tool, but as a partner in writing an abstract, it shows that it's quite capable and competent at taking the work that you're working on and helping you transform it into a 200 to 400 word bite, which we know can be very hard when we're working from our 800 version with all of our ideas. Lastly, another cool use, and one that I'm planning to make use of myself, is you can use it to help you turn a presentation into a blog post. So I presented last week. I recorded my talk with my phone, and I'm going to get it transcribed and then turn it to ChatGPT to have it remove the fillers and the overt marks of an oral presentation in order for it to be fit and ready to be posted as a blog post. If we turn to the revision stage, we can see a bunch of other techniques. Here, ChatGPT is very good at revising for tone. If we ask it to make our paragraph or our draft more persuasive or informative or descriptive or humorous, it can do that. And not only can it revise for us on the fly and give us an output, if we prefer, we can have it give us suggestions in bullet point form so we can make the changes ourselves and become more aware of those features of our writing that it is identifying as fitting this particular style or not. We can even have it emulate the work of a particular other author. Here, Rob Lennon again suggests rewriting a pithy tweet that he wants to write in the style of Hemingway. But we could also do this in the style of Malcolm Gladwell for longer pieces, or the New Yorker, or the Atlantic, or in the style of your favorite Wall Street Journal or New York Times op-ed writer. All of these would be exciting and interesting ways to reflect on your own writing style and to emulate someone you might be interested in. So how can we use it for teaching, though? If that's a bunch of ideas about general writing, general research, what about teaching specific applications? Well, another scholar who's really been writing a lot of really good information is Ryan Watkins, and he has some suggestions for AI-based activities that we can do in the classroom. One is that we can have a prompt competition. This helps orient students to the idea that these tools on their own will not produce good results, but you have to have a sophisticated understanding. And it can challenge them to come up with a robust understanding of the task and of the specific disciplinary content as they compete against other teams to get the best, most thorough, most accurate output from a tool like ChatGPT. It focuses on conceptualizing the task rather than executing the task, which can be a deeper learning approach. Another thing that we can do if we're trying to get students up to speed, maybe at the beginning of a module with a new concept or area of knowledge, is challenge them to have ChatGPT write an introductory essay about the topic or material, and then to exhaustively research all of the claims and evidence that it makes, and to find citations and corrections where appropriate. They can do that by doing tracking changes in Word or Docs, or you could even, again, have it become a competition. Which team found the best citations? Which team found the critical errors that might have creeped in to that output? There's more, even more ideas. Here from a slideshow that, again, I'll be sharing my slides at the end of this with a link, is creative ideas for using AI in education. These tools can be used to generate personas. So for example, maybe you want to have your students practice or role play interviewing subjects, maybe for research, maybe for social work, all kinds of applications. You could provide data about a particular set of users or interview subjects or personas, and then have students interact with that and explore how it could work. Be a great way to prepare for interviewing subjects, and you could even test their outputs and their questions to see, in fact, are they implementing the kinds of techniques you hope they do. Another great application would be to support the creation of scenarios or cases that you can use in your teaching. Maybe you already have an existing scenario or case that works well, but you'd really like to have 6 of them so that you could have each group work on a different one. You can use the original case as a model and provide information and use AI to help generate all of those different cases. Lastly, there's all kinds of behind-the-scenes workflows that might be valuable. Here, a school in Thailand is using these tools to work with transcripts from audio of children speaking in order to translate them into digestible text that then they can use to identify issues that they want to address through teaching interventions. A great example of automating a process that would otherwise be cumbersome and enabling an educational intervention that could be powerful. We can also use these tools to overcome traditional barriers to learning. Here, Ethan Mollick and his collaborator Lilik Mollick described 3: improving transfer, breaking of explanatory depth, and training students to critically evaluate explanations. An example that they provide is you could have AI generate a story that implemented a concept and then challenge students to find gaps or inaccuracies in how that concept is being applied. Again, checking understanding and working with the curiosity gap created by using the AI as an interlocutor is a really powerful way these tools could be used. We can also use them in instructional design. Here, Dr. Philippa Hardman suggests a way we can use these tools to move from our own lectures that we may have created or instructional content and create assessments in the form of quizzes that can be used to check student understanding. She suggests we don't have to rely on very simple multiple choice tests, but we can actually create a prompt that uses a progressive technique. Here you can see again, she comes up with a very sophisticated prompt. She describes the AI's role, the subject or learners that we're aiming at, and she describes a specific instructional strategy. She wants to use multiple choice, but in a way that uses a technique called undoing, where we challenge students to identify and reject misconceptions about how a concept works or how it could be applied. She even provides an example of a template of how this should look so that the AI understands exactly what to do, and then pairs that with a summary of the content that was covered, and then it can give you a quiz that would have all of the pre-filled data. Of course, you'd want to check it, but it can be a great way of ramping up your productivity. A final example that I want to share is just-in-time learning. Here, there was an institute on malware analysis at Hopkins, and what they brought together was a number of scholars and students at different levels with different backgrounds and different expertise. And in their 5-day institute, one of the things that participants were able to do is, as the class was going along, if there was some area or gap in their knowledge, such as Martin here didn't understand assembly programming, they could ask ChatGPT rather than the teacher. So they didn't slow down the learning process, but yet they found the information they needed to keep up and to understand what was happening. And in this particular context, because they were coding, they could actually use ChatGPT to output code and to correct code when it didn't work. I, in fact, found this for myself just before my presentation last week. I was working with R Studio to do some quantitative analysis, and I was using an unfamiliar function. And I was able to give it the variables I had, describe what I wanted to do, and it gave me the correct code and the correct function in order to complete the task I was trying to accomplish. Saved me a lot of Googling, I can tell you that. So this is where the rubber hits the road, though. How do we get good results out? We have our use cases, we know what we want to do, but how can we interact with these tools in a way that achieves our goal? And this is where prompt crafting, or what's sometimes called prompt engineering, comes into play. These are techniques for getting the tool to understand our goal in a very precise way so that it can give us a good output. Now, ChatGPT itself offers some basic guidelines. We want to provide context a little bit, but not too much. Extraneous details can actually distract and hurt the performance, but the right amount and the right specificity can make a big difference. We want to use proper formatting. It will emulate your style that you use in the prompt. You want to keep prompts concise, test your prompts, and don't be afraid to make adjustments as you go and try out slightly different variations on how you're describing the task to see what works best. And of course, be creative. Think about unconventional ways to get it to do things you wouldn't otherwise imagine it was capable of. Now, with that as background, we can go a little further, and we've already kind of got a hint about some advanced approaches. Many of the people who are posting examples have done what they are calling mega prompts because they integrate lots of information into one prompt. And I've distilled this down to, I think, a usable tool that you can all use. And I'm going to give you a template here in just a minute, but let me describe it for you. First, we want to describe the AI's role. What's the role of the communicator and the basic topic and context for the communication or the output? What are relevant knowledge sources that are important to this domain? It could include information sources, analytical models, or even an audience analysis for the task. Then describe the task as precisely and concisely as possible. Here is where you might want to include specific analytical or communicative strategies that should be used in the output. Then you can specify your output format, length, style, genre, media, specify textual formatting. There's lots of variables here that ChatGPT and similar tools are able to work with. Finally, for complex tasks, it can be very valuable and lead to a much better result if you provide an example that offers example content, so some information you're working with, perhaps your own brainwrite or your own outline for a conference abstract, or provide an example format. So when we looked at Dr. Philippa Hardman's multiple choice test, she just provided the outline of the format the result should be returned in. I'll give you an example. I'm just about to write an abstract or a proposal for a conference that's coming up. And here's the prompt that I'm going to create. You're a scholar of rhetoric and composition, and you're preparing a presentation proposal for the Future of Writing Conference. Here's the key areas of expertise that you bring that should inform your approach to the proposal. Now, write a proposal for a presentation titled, and this is where I'm telling it what I want to actually do, AI-assisted writing, developing creative composing processes for situated workflows. And the proposal should follow the format of the CARS model, which is labeled as an example below. I give it the words length. I want a friendly but professional and academic style. And in a full version of this prompt, I'll provide a detailed version of the CARS model. For those of you who don't know, the CARS model was developed by a scholar, Swales, based on research of the most effective abstracts across a number of fields. And it follows a very formulaic structure, which is great for me because I could dump in my free write or my ideas for my talk and have AI help me apply this model to the abstract draft. What else could I have it do using the same kind of advanced prompting strategy? Well, if we focus just on the idea of using an example to illustrate what we're looking for and getting feedback based on it, I could have it redesign a syllabus to use universal language. So for example, Womack here provides examples of paternalistic language, which is not good, and cooperative language, and cold syllabus language versus warm syllabus language, and commands versus invitations. I could enter my syllabus into ChatGPT and say, suggest some revisions to make my syllabus warmer, suggest some revisions to identify commands and to turn them into invitations. All of these could help me revise a syllabus to be more welcoming and supportive to my students. I could design a lecture or activity for a class. The AI's role would be to be an instructor who wanted to take advantage of a new theory or framework, such as the Universal Design for Learning framework. I might have it take a look at my outline and say, what are ways that I could add an activity or an explanation that would promote engagement? Or how could I present information in different ways that I'm already doing that would add multiple means of representation? Or what would be some ideas for activities I could do that would have a physical action or a communicative goal or an executive function in order to work in the category of action and expression? So I hope for what you're seeing here is that you can start with your own ideas and your own content. And then if you have a structured model or some structured example that you're working with, you can use the AI tool to quickly explore ways to build on it, extend it, and transform it. So let's try it out. This is where we're going to get interactive today. I have a model for you. I've created a Google form that puts that advanced technique I just showed you into it. And what I've also done is I pre-published a spreadsheet that will show all the results. So if we could all share, be very brave, share just one idea that occurs to you today for a way you might use a tool like ChatGPT for your personal writing and research across the invention stage, the drafting stage, the revision stage, or for teaching in order to do an activity, then we can create a prompt that can help us do that. At this time, Lisa, it would be great if you want to add this into the chat. We're going to take about 10 minutes. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give you a quick reminder of what some of those tasks might be. But if you already have your idea, feel free to start typing away and enter your result. What were some thoughts? Well, let's say you want to do pre-writing and research. You could do a process where you have an invention. Maybe you have an existing free write and you wanted to extract your main ideas and themes and represent them to you as an outline. Or maybe you have a free write and you wanted to suggest additional research questions that might be related to the things you're thinking about. Or you have a free write and you wanted to suggest gaps or counter arguments to the direction you're taking things in. You might also start with research notes. Maybe you have some quotes and paraphrases, and you want it to suggest claims that you might make based on the evidence. or suggest points of significance that are relevant to your own set of research questions you provide. You might also use it for qualitative coding suggestions. Maybe you have a table with existing codes, definitions, and examples, and you want its opinion on how it would code a particular excerpt from an interview. For drafting, we've already covered some great examples. It could help you write an abstract or write a blog post based on a presentation. For revision, it could revise a paragraph in a specific journal style or in a specific tone. And for teaching, we talked about the ideas of creating instructional materials. You could start from lecture notes and create a script or an outline. You could have it suggest revisions based on a model like Universal Design of Learning. You could have it create a lesson plan, maybe even reusing a lab procedure or a think, pair, share procedure for a specific topic with specific contextual information. Or another way folks have used this, they actually will have it create a sensory description of something you want to visualize, and then use that ChatGPT description to go to a visual generation tool like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion and create a custom visual for your project. So what I'd like to do now is go ahead and take at least 5 to 8 minutes. I'd love you all to try out the form, submit at least one idea, even if it's incomplete and you have some gaps, just so we can see what people are thinking of and get ideas from each other. And while that's going on, Lisa, if there's questions in the chat, I'd be happy to look at those.
We've got just a comment of the link is view only. Never mind. They clicked the wrong one, I see. So it looks like it's okay.
And thanks, Jen. Right now, I'm gonna grab.
So there's a question. Could you clarify what should go in the prompt for describe the role of the communicator?
So yes, great. The role of the communicator is a description of who the AI bot should be. So you would describe who it is. I'm an academic researcher, and you're writing a proposal for an academic conference. So it's basic, role, context, and topic. Then you go more in depth in the subsequent categories. And for those of you who asked for slides, you'll find them here.
We will also send them out, Abram, after the session, so all those people that registered for the session.
Excellent.
Hi, are we able to ask a question here?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, really quickly, can you clarify the last question on form?
Definitely. So the last question is an example. This is optional. If you have an existing example that can help the tool better understand what you're looking for, this is a great place to put it. You can put in my example, I provided an outline based on the CARS model, right? You could also do an example of your own writing. Maybe here's the lesson plan I did last time. Do it like this, only with this new topic and this new set of information. So it could be a model for the tool that shows the kind of output you're looking for. Awesome. Thank you all. I'm starting to see lots of great examples popping up here. I think this will do a lot to spur each other's creativity.
Abram, I wondered with with some of the tools you're using, can you enter something that's already been written and ask the ChatGPT or other systems to look at what is missing and for it to identify?
Absolutely. One of the ways that people would use it, for example, let's say I'm starting to create a rubric for an assignment and I have some of the matrix filled out. For example, I know what an exceptional version of performance is, but I'm trying to look for ideas at how to do the other levels. I could have ChatGPT fill in the gaps. Of course, I would want to revise it for accuracy, but it can absolutely fill in gaps and it can work with table data. Also great for suggesting counter arguments. You can have it act as a debate coach. You can even ask it to look for specific logical fallacies. Whatever you can reference, then it can use to interact with you and help you explore data. Great. There's some great things coming here. Well, I want to make sure we have time at the end for questions. So if you're busy typing away, feel free to do so. But I'm going to move on for now. We'll make sure that these links go back out again if you didn't capture them out of today's chat, so that you can come back and look at these ideas. And certainly from my slides, you'll have the model for how to do this kind of prompt creation. Here, I'm going to go back to my slides. And can we see that okay? Good. So if we move beyond this basic level of prompting, if you want to become a so-called power user, there's another level to this. It all bases on the idea that you want to think of the AI as a genius in a room who doesn't have access to the internet, at least for now, and who may have limited knowledge about the world, but if you can explain things in such a way, is very capable at executing. And in fact, it's a great way to think of the process is you have to teach it what you want it to be able to do, but then it can do it. How do we do that? Well, if we're thinking about complex tasks, a big part of this is breaking it down into simpler subtasks. One of the things that folks have talked about is the idea that if you prompt the model to explain how it arrived at a solution, it actually does a better job of getting to the solution. You can ask for justifications for many possible answers, then ask it to synthesize, or you can generate many outputs and use the model to pick the best one. A very common idea about this is the idea of let's think step by step. So for example, if you give ChatGPT a problem, a math problem, a story problem, it will often get the answer wrong. But if you say, let's think step by step, and you ask it to use a language that actually spells out the step by step, it will get the right answer because it's bootstrapping based on how others have solved similar problems in the past in a way that's not capable of doing on its own. Prompts also are often referred by programmers using these terms. Zero shot is where you just say, give me an essay on blah, where you just ask it what you want and see what you get. One shot is where you provide an example. Few shot is where you provide multiple examples or a series of examples, and chain of thought is where you actually prompt it to work through a multi-stage process. You can see an example of this here where in the first input, we get a wrong answer because we just ask a problem statement, but in the second one, because we provide an example that illustrates the logic by which we want the problem to be solved, then it can do much better. We can also discover prompts. There's tons of prompt pages out there. Here's one I just found that has some really great prompts and really helps illustrate how to employ some of these concepts. And then, of course, there's a wealth of tools like the link here that really explains the logic of prompting in great detail. That's actually part of the OpenAI community infrastructure that you can check out. So a few final thoughts before I open it to questions. A way of seeing is also a way of not seeing, as the rhetorical scholar Kenneth Burke likes to say. I was reminded recently, I was talking to someone who studies rhetoric and cognitive science, and I asked him, what tasks would you trust ChatGPT to do for you? And he said, well, that's a really interesting question. He was reminded when he was traveling that he's come to rely upon Google Maps for navigation, and without his phone, he's practically helpless in a way that he never was before Google Apps existed. And it's true that to some degree, when you come to rely on technologies and outsource aspects of your cognitive capacity, there can be a danger in that. But I think this is where we want to think carefully about finding ways to think our own ideas first as we interact with these tools, finding ways to leverage our unique expertise, finding ways to make sure that the way we're engaging these tools is actually extending and building on our expertise and helping us go further than we could on our own, rather than replacing or becoming a shortcut or a form of laziness in our process and our thinking. I think if we do that, what we can find is that these tools may be disruptive. They may impede our habitual ways of doing things, but in a positive way. They can help us unlearn and relearn how to write in a new, fresh way that may challenge us to better conceptualize what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, what models it's based on, and what we're really looking to accomplish. I'll leave you lastly with a couple resources that I think you'll find very valuable. This one is from the WAC Clearinghouse, the Writing Across the Curriculum organization, and it has a bunch of policy statements and links. And then this one, which is generated by Anna Mills, who I mentioned previously is someone who's done a lot of work in this area, that has a pretty exhaustive curated list of articles that range from public pieces on ethics and values to things that have to do directly with teaching applications. And if you're really looking for a deep dive on a lot of different resources, this would be the starting place that I would recommend. So at this point, I think I'll just leave the feedback QR code up here, and I'll be happy to take any questions. And I think we could take it from the chat. And then Lisa, can we invite people to just hop on mic? Does that work?
I think that would be great. I've also put the link in the chat if anyone needs that for feedback. And I'll kick things off with a question in our chat room. And it's I'm playing with trying to generate a short work of fiction. Curious to know if AI has imagination.
This is a great question. It has the imagination that is in the model. So one of the scholars that I have followed and talked a lot about with is Lance Cummings. And he's actually teaching a digital storytelling class right now, and he's blogging about it weekly. And he's using specialized tool for creative writing. So they actually have a ChatGPT for creative writing, and it's optimized. What he finds is that you have to be really intentional about how you use it in your process. So are you using it to get ideas? Are you using it to try out different approaches? Maybe you want it to rapidly prototype. What if I shift from first person to third person? And what does that do to the boon of my piece? So there's a lot of really fun stuff to do. Think of the unbelievable work folks have done for workshop techniques. And then now you can apply that to working with an AI interlocutor. So absolutely, I think it can be a great tool for inspiring us as creative writers.
Wonderful. Another question, do you expect future versions of ChatGPT to be able to generate high quality prompts for ChatGPT from low quality prompts?
That is a great question. You can absolutely do that. You could probably even do that now. One of the things I saw that was really cool, and this a little creepy, is somebody put in their own text and said, what did you learn about my personal style? Now condense that to 200 words. And then they used that as a future prompt. They said, write in this style, paste in the 200 words and about this topic. So you can absolutely use it to pre-program prompts. You can use it to create personas. You can use it to distill information in a way it understands. And it can tell you what it understands from what you're telling it. So yes, absolutely. That kind of meta programming is very available and something that is really interesting to be able to do.
All right. Angela's asking, how do we actually get into ChatGPT? It seems to be full.
Yes, I noticed that today, hence why we did a Google form rather than go to ChatGPT. Frankly, this is a big concern for a lot of us who are exploring these tools. There's already a paid tier. Do you need the paid tier to do this at all? Will the free version eventually go away entirely or just become, impossible? The one thing I will say is that there's a ton of other tools that do have freemium options that are maybe better or worse than ChatGPT for some things, but don't have the huge popularity and crush of volume that it has right now. This is where folks are using Writer AI. They're using tools like Lex. They're using tools like Jasper AI. In some cases, they're more optimized for business, but you can still work with them. So if you're really interested in these tools and you're finding that you just can't get on ChatGPT and you're not willing to pay for it, look for some of the other tools in this space. And there's a bunch of competitors that are about to release. Anthropic has an ethical framed one. There's an Israeli firm that's starting one. You're going to see a lot more ChatGPTs in the near future.
Great. So let's say I use ChatGPT to help me design a syllabus. How should my use of ChatGPT be acknowledged in the syllabus?
Right.
Any idea?
That's a great question. I really go back to thinking about our authorial intent. For researchers, you'll often see folks who use sophisticated modeling techniques. They'll specify which tool they used, where they got it from. I'm using a tool that was developed at this institute, and here's how it works, and here's the research papers that show its methodology. I think it goes back to the substance of what it does. If you're using a tool like ChatGPT as a glorified Grammarly to do tone and style and conciseness editing, you probably don't need to say too much about that. But on the other hand, if you used it substantially through your research and outlining and drafting phases, then maybe you do want to say that. I think these tools are very much, these conventions are very much in flow. What we might want to attribute today and acknowledge by tomorrow may be, of course you're doing that. It doesn't need to be mentioned. So I think now providing an acknowledgement of how you're using the tools on almost anything you create with them is not a bad idea and a great approach to make sure that you're alerting to others to your how you're authoring your works.
Great. So a question, are you concerned that everything we put into ChatGPT is then owned by it and will analyze and possibly be misused?
Absolutely. And that brings one great point I really wanted to make that I nearly skipped over. So thank you very much, whoever asked that question. One thing I would not recommend, ChatGPT can analyze your students' works. It can rate it using a provided rubric, and it could even suggest constructive feedback. However, entering your students' work into a proprietary tool like ChatGPT is, for the moment, probably not a great idea, because unless you have your students' permission and approval, you're sharing their work is going in there. So I'm comfortable putting my work in there. I'd be comfortable getting feedback on comments I wanted to give on their own, but I wouldn't be comfortable copying and pasting student work into one of these services at the current time for that exact reason. For myself, for my own work, I post everything on the web already. So it's eventually going to crawl and scrape and learn from my work. So I think that the benefits outweigh the dangers for me personally, but for students, that's not a choice I'm comfortable making right now for them. I might, in my AI course I'm going to ask students, can we do this? And it will be very much a consent approach.
And do you happen to know, is this tool available in multiple languages currently?
That is a great question. I'm not the expert in that. If anyone out there knows that answer, please chime in the chat. Barack, maybe you know that. I know some of them are. I'm just not sure specifically which ones and which one areas.
Well, we have a question. I'd like to hear more about what you mean relating to relearning how to write. The language has some negative connotation for me. So any comments?
Yeah. Really fascinating talk by a man named Matthew Overstreet at the recent SEAS conference, talked about the fact that traditionally in writing and composition instruction, we think of writers as having internal mental representations or symbolic models of how writing happens, and that they refer to those as their writing. And he suggests that modern cognitive science suggests that that's not the way it works at all, because cognition is enacted. So we're not constantly referencing models, we're just doing stuff in the same way that we have behavioral actions. That doesn't mean we're not smart, that doesn't mean we don't learn, but that it's not mediated by symbolic things. The point of this is that what it suggests about learning is the best way to help students learn is to actually impede their habitual way of doing things, so that then they become more adaptive and flexible in how they deploy their repertoires of learning and writing. And so we're not talking about deprogramming here or any of those kinds of negative connotations. What we're talking about is the fact that when you're willing to try doing things a slightly different way, that may change your process a little bit, it can actually help you learn a lot. So for example, as I started thinking about how am I gonna get this tool to help me write an abstract, I had to realize, oh, I use that CARS model thing, but I have my own version of it, so I might have to write that down. And then what are the key aspects that I wanted to know about what I want to do in my talk? It's not just me starting to write, and that might help me prioritize what I want to do at a conceptual level before I begin writing. And all of those things might be slightly different than how I would do it otherwise. So I'm unlearning my old way of writing an abstract, which is the night before I have an hour to get to 200 words. And I'm saying, let me conceptualize this in a rigorous way so that AI can help me with it, which may actually take me longer in the short run, but in the long run may give me a more rigorous conceptualization of that writing task and save me time and allow me to be more productive.
Okay, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Let's see if we can squeeze in another question. Can ChatGPT create quantitative content such that involve math equations?
No, it's not very good at it right now. This is a known problem. Anything that has to do with math and physics and the real world and common sense, because what it's doing, it's predicting word by word. So it's only bootstrapping. If you can help it think through the problem in a way that it's essentially mimicking the logical pattern used by other previous people who've done it, it can do that. But it's not a calculator. Although Stephen Wolfram, who has this amazing website that does all this amazing computational appy stuff, has suggested that someday, if they could link ChatGPT with the types of services his platform provides, then that could become possible. So eventually, but I don't think right now.
Super. Do you happen to know, can the current plagiarism tools detect the essays built using ChatGPT?
Absolutely not. None of them. What we're finding is that the best tools are only accurate about 20 to 30% of the time. And it's a real problem because students who are most likely to use them and most likely to be suspected of using them, such as English language learners and students in vulnerable populations, we don't want them hauled in to be told they're going to get an academic dishonesty if they don't confess that they use ChatGPT. So I would strongly caution all of our scholars on right now, please, please, please do not police your students with these tools, and approach it with a mindset of curiosity. If they're using the tools, there's good reasons for it, and help them get to your learning goals however you can. A focus on the positive journey is always worth a pound of the other thing.
Wonderful. Well, it is almost 2:00. I want to thank Professor Anders, for presenting today. This has been just wildly informative and so wonderful. And thanks to everyone who joined us today on Zoom. Do take a moment, if you could, to scan the QR code, give us some feedback and ideas and your thoughts. We'd appreciate that. Otherwise, please have a wonderful day. We do have additional programming that Sarah shared in the beginning of our presentation today. So certainly take a look at what other opportunities are coming up. The ChatGPT series continues. Thank you so much, Professor Anders.
Thank you so much. And one last plug from me. I'll be teaching an AI and writing course this fall. And if any of those of you who are out there want to do some collaboration, whether research or teaching based, I'm very excited to do that kind of work. So please do not be shy about reaching out to me through my email or any other channel you have available. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this.